Okay, so, you sent us a bunch of stuff about the Patriot, right? Looks like you want to, like, dig a little deeper.
Yeah, go beyond the Hollywood spectacle right now.
Exactly. And get into, like, the real nitty-gritty of what the American Revolution was actually like, especially down south.
It's really interesting that the movie focuses on South Carolina, during the Revolution.
Yeah.
That period, what, 1775 to 1783, when the 13 colonies were like wrestling with this whole idea of, breaking away from
Yeah,
Britain.
yeah. Independence, the whole deal.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And what's often forgotten is that the British, they kind of thought that the South, especially South Carolina, would be like full of loyalists, you
Well,
know?
people who were still loyal to the king.
Exactly.
But I think they got a bit of a surprise.
Oh, yeah. They totally misjudged how much the people in the South, wanted to govern themselves. They were like, we're in this fight too.
It wasn't just some up north thing happening.
Right. Exactly.
So that's where Benjamin Martin comes in.
The main character in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, like he's a mix of a few real guys, but especially based on Francis Marion.
Oh, the Swamp Fox.
Yeah, he was a total, like, innovator when it came to fighting, wasn't
Oh
he?
yeah, a master of guerrilla warfare. Like forget those big formal battles with everyone lined up in rows.
Right, yeah.
His men, they would pop out of nowhere, attack, and then disappear back into the swamps before the British even knew what hit them. It drove them crazy. And it was super effective, in battles like Utah Springs, a real turning point down south.
Yeah, the movie shows this too.
Right.
Those local militias, not really a proper army, right? Just kind of like ragtag groups of, like, everyday people.
Using whatever they could find.
Yeah, exactly.
And their knowledge of the land, oh man, it was like their secret weapon. They'd disappear into the swamps and the British wouldn't have a clue where they went.
And these unconventional methods, I mean, they weren't just annoying the British, right?
Yeah.
They actually played a big part in helping the Americans win the war.
Totally. It really busts that myth that the revolution was won just through these huge, like, traditional battles,
Yeah, yeah.
the small-scale stuff, the localized fighting. It was absolutely crucial.
Yeah, but it's easy to forget, I think, watching those battle scenes, what it must have been like for just normal folks back then.
Right, trying to live their lives.
Yeah, imagine food shortages, supplies running out all the time, and that constant fear of violence.
Yeah.
It must have been terrifying.
And on top of that, you've got families being ripped apart because they're on different sides. Like, imagine your brother's fighting for the Patriots.
Yeah.
And your cousin is like a die-hard loyalist.
Oh, wow.
It was a total internal conflict, a fracturing of communities. You had the Patriots, those who wanted independence.
Right.
The loyalists, loyal to Britain.
Right.
And then tons of people just caught in the middle, trying to survive. It was a mess.
It's just heartbreaking to think about. I mean, the movie shows a little of that emotional side, right? The sacrifices people made and how this war touched every part of their lives. But there's this huge issue that we haven't talked about yet.
Slavery.
Right.
Yeah, this is where things get really, really messy, complicated. You see, both the British and the Americans saw an opportunity, a way to use the issue of slavery to their advantage. They started promising freedom to enslaved people who would fight for their side, which, shows you the twisted morality of the time.
It's so messed up. And the really sad part is that even after the war, the promises weren't always kept. Slavery didn't just disappear. It just became this, like, a big open wound.
Absolutely. The revolution didn't solve anything about slavery. It just shoved it into the spotlight, which, set the stage for future conflicts. And even today, we're still grappling with the whole question of freedom and equality in America because of it.
Yeah. It's like, what does fighting for freedom really mean when you have an entire group of people who are still enslaved?
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy question to think about.
It's a paradox that haunted the entire revolution.
Right. It makes you realize that history isn't just good guys and bad guys,
Yeah.
It's way more complicated than that.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to remember that The Patriot, while it's a fun movie, it's just that, a movie.
Yeah, yeah.
It's entertainment, not a documentary. It takes liberties with history, to make it more exciting.
So what do you think? Knowing what we know now, does The Patriot change how you see these historical films? Like, how much truth does a movie need to have to still capture the real feeling of a historical period?
It's a good question. The American Revolution wasn't just about those big battles and famous names. It was real people, everyday folks, each with their own stories, struggles, and hopes. They were incredibly brave, and their fight for freedom, it still matters today.
Yeah, it does.
And we should never forget that.
Absolutely.